Ryan's office revenge.
You know that moment when your world just stops? Like everything goes quiet except for your heartbeat pounding in your ears. That's what happened when Rachel from HR slid that paper across her desk. Early retirement package, she called it. 45% of my pension, at 48 years old. I'm Harold Morrison, Hal to most people, and up until that Tuesday morning in March, I was a senior systems architect at TechFlow Solutions. 15 years of my life building the banking systems that kept this company running. 15 years of weekends, late nights, and missed dinners with my daughter Sophie. I didn't say anything at first, just stared at that number like it might change if I looked hard enough. 45%. They wanted me to train my replacement in India and then disappear quietly into retirement at 48, all so they could avoid the messy business of laying off someone my age. We need your decision by tomorrow, Rachel said, not meeting my eyes. She looked about as comfortable as someone getting a root canal. The new ownership wants to streamline operations. The new ownership. Pinnacle Corporation had bought us 6 months ago, and ever since then it had been death by 1,000 cuts. First, the free coffee disappeared, then the casual dress code. Now they were coming for the people who actually knew how things worked. I smiled and told her I'd think about it. Professional to the end, you know? But inside, I was already making plans. See, they picked the wrong guy to push around. I didn't just work on those banking systems, I designed them. Every line of code, every security protocol, every backup procedure. 15 years of zero security breaches because I knew what I was doing. And now some 32-year-old MBA named Preston Wells thought he could replace me with offshore developers who'd work for a quarter of my salary. Preston was sitting there too, by the way, leaning back in his chair like he owned the place, which, technically, he did now. Regional Director of Operations, they called him. I called him something else, but I kept that to myself. Harold, he said, and I noticed he never called me Hal. This is really a generous offer. Most companies would simply terminate employment in a restructuring situation. Generous. Right. Like I should be grateful they were only cutting my throat halfway. The drive home was a blur. I kept thinking about Sophie, my 17-year-old daughter who'd be starting college next year. Her mother and I divorced 3 years ago, and Sophie chose to live with me. Smart kid, probably figured I was the more stable option. Little did she know her old man was about to become unemployed. Sophie was doing homework at the kitchen table when I walked in. She looked up and immediately knew something was wrong. Kids have radar for that stuff. Bad day at work? She asked. Could be worse, I said, which was my standard answer for everything. How was school? She launched into a story about her physics teacher, but I was only half listening. My phone had been buzzing with text messages since I left the office. Word travels fast in a company that's dying. The first text was from Hunter Davis, one of my team leads. Heard about the meeting. We're all screwed, aren't we? The second was from Isabella Reed, my most senior engineer. Preston told us we're being right-sized. What's your plan? But the third text changed everything. It was from Olivia Turner, a technical recruiter I'd worked with years ago. Hal, call me ASAP. Have something you need to hear. I waited until Sophie went to bed before calling Olivia back. She picked up on the second ring. Hal, thank God, she said. I've been trying to reach you for weeks. Are you still at TechFlow? For now, I said. Why? Because I have a client who's been asking about you specifically, Cameron Grant, CEO of Vertex Technologies. They're a fintech startup, and they need someone with your exact background. Legacy banking systems, enterprise security, the whole package. I almost laughed. Here I was, being pushed into early retirement because I was supposedly too old and too expensive, and meanwhile someone else was actively looking for my skills. What kind of money are we talking about? I asked. $175,000 base plus equity. And Hal? Cameron's been burned by young hotshots before. He specifically wants someone with real experience. $175,000. That was more than I was making at TechFlow, and they wanted to cut me down to less than half of that. I sat in my living room for a long time after that call, staring at nothing. Was I really considering this? Walking away from 15 years at TechFlow to work for a startup? But what was I really walking away from? A company that didn't value me anymore. A pension that wouldn't be worth much if they kept cutting it. A boss who thought my experience was a liability instead of an asset. I opened my laptop and started looking through my files. Not the company files, I wasn't stupid enough to steal anything. But my personal notes, my contacts, The relationships I'd built over 15 years, information about which clients were unhappy with recent service changes, which CTOs were planning major system overhauls, which companies were starting to lose confidence in TechFlow's stability. Around midnight, I called Cameron Grant. He answered on the third ring, wide awake despite the hour. "Mr. Morrison," he said, "Olivia told me you might be calling. She mentioned you're looking for someone with my background. I'm looking for someone who can build trust with enterprise clients, someone who understands that banking systems aren't just code. They're the foundation of everything these companies do. Someone who doesn't think legacy is a dirty word." We talked for 2 hours about system architecture, about the challenges of scaling fintech solutions, about what it meant to build something that would last. By the time we hung up, I had a job offer. The next morning, I walked into Rachel's office with my decision. Preston Wells was there, too, looking smug in his expensive suit and designer glasses. He had that look young executives get when they think they're about to crush someone. "Harold," Preston said, not bothering to stand, "have you considered our generous offer?" "I have some questions first," I said, sitting down across from them. "Who's going to handle the Westfield Bank integration next month, and what about the security audit for Pacific Trust?" Preston waved his hand dismissively. "We'll distribute those responsibilities appropriately. That's not your concern anymore." "Actually, it is my concern. I promised Natalie Wilson at Pacific Trust that I'd personally oversee their security review. She specifically requested me after the last consultant they used nearly caused a data breach. Natalie and I had worked together for 8 years. She trusted me because I'd never let her down, not once. These weren't just business relationships to me. They were professional friendships built on mutual respect and proven reliability. "Those are company relationships, not personal ones," Preston said, his voice getting sharper. "The client will work with whoever we assign." "Will they?" "Because Natalie specifically wrote into their contract that any changes to the technical lead require her approval. I helped negotiate that clause after the last vendor switch went badly." I watched Preston's face change as he realized I wasn't the pushover he'd expected. Rachel was looking increasingly uncomfortable, probably wondering why she'd agreed to let Preston handle this meeting. "Is it true you're moving the entire IT department offshore?" I asked. The color drained from Preston's face. Rachel suddenly became very interested in her paperwork. "Where did you hear that?" Preston demanded. "Is it true? That's confidential company information." "So that's a yes." I leaned forward. "Were you planning to tell me that before or after I accepted your early retirement package?" See, here's what Preston didn't understand about the technology business. Information flows like water. You can try to contain it, but it always finds a way out. I'd been in this industry for 15 years. I had friends at every major vendor, former colleagues at competing firms, clients who trusted me enough to share their concerns. I knew about the offshore plan because Noah Fisher at Westfield Bank had told me. His board was worried about service continuity after the acquisition, so they'd done some research on Pinnacle's track record. Turns out they'd pulled the same stunt at 2 other companies they'd acquired. Buy the company for the client base, gut the technical staff, move everything offshore, pocket the savings. Preston recovered quickly, settling back into his chair with a cold smile. "The offer is what it is, Harold. Take it or leave it. I'll leave it." "Excuse me?" "I quit. Effective immediately." The words hung in the air between us. Rachel looked like she'd been slapped. Preston's smile faltered for just a moment before he regained his composure. "Company policy requires 2 weeks' notice from senior staff," he said. "Check my original contract," I said. The one TechFlow never bothered to update after the acquisition. Notice periods are waived in cases of constructive dismissal. I'd done my homework. Vernon Cole, our original founder, had been big on employee rights. That was back when TechFlow actually cared about its people, before we became just another line item on Pinnacle's spreadsheet. "You can't just walk out on your responsibilities," Preston sputtered. "Watch me." I stood up and headed for the door, then turned back. "Oh, and I've accepted a position with Vertex Technologies. Since TechFlow never implemented non-compete clauses, I'm free to take my knowledge with me." That's when Preston lost it. The corporate mask slipped completely, and I saw the entitled kid underneath all that expensive polish. "You've just made a serious mistake," he said, voice shaking with anger. "We'll be reviewing all of your communications and client interactions. If we find even a hint that you've been poaching clients or sharing proprietary information will bury you in litigation. I felt a chill run down my spine. Not because I'd done anything wrong, I hadn't, but because I knew how these things went. Big companies with deep pockets could make your life hell even if you were completely innocent. The legal fees alone could bankrupt someone like me. But I'd been careful, meticulous even. I hadn't taken anything that didn't belong to me. No client lists, no source code, no internal documents. What I had was 15 years of experience, relationships built on trust and competence, and the knowledge of exactly which clients were getting fed up with TechFlow's declining service. I haven't taken anything that doesn't belong to me, I said, keeping my voice steady. My client relationships, though, the trust I've built over 15 years, that belongs to me, and I'm taking it with me. I walked out before he could respond, heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst through my chest. My team was waiting at my desk, Hunter, Isabella, and Abigail Foster from QA. They knew. Of course they knew. News travels fast in dying companies. Is it true? Isabella asked. You're really leaving? I nodded. The look in their eyes, part admiration, part terror, told me everything I needed to know about what they were going through. What about us? Hunter looked terrified. He had 2 young kids and a mortgage. Check your emails in an hour, I said quietly. All of you. I packed my desk quickly. Family photos, including the one of Sophie at her last science fair where she'd won 2nd place for her project on renewable energy systems. The world's greatest dad mug she'd given me for Father's Day, even though we both knew it was a stretch. The emergency inhaler I kept for her asthma, just in case. 15 years of my life fit into one cardboard box. Security escorted me out. Company policy for high-level departures, they said, like I was suddenly a threat after a decade and a half of loyal service, like I hadn't given the best years of my career to this place. But you know what? I didn't cry this time. Not in the elevator, not in the lobby, not even in my car. Instead, I pulled out my phone and started making calls. First to Cameron Grant at Vertex. I've quit. They took it about as well as you'd expect. We'll have legal ready, he said. Don't worry, we've dealt with Pinnacle before. Second, to Vernon Cole. He picked up on the 4th ring, sounding like he was on a beach somewhere, probably spending his acquisition money. Hal, is everything okay? Not really, Vernon. Pinnacle just tried to force me into early retirement with a 45% pension cut. I quit and took a job with Vertex Technologies. Silence. Then, damn it. I'm sorry, Hal. The acquisition wasn't supposed to go like this. But it did, I said. And now they're threatening to sue me for accepting another job. More silence. What do you need from me? I need you to remind them that you never implemented non-competes at TechFlow because you said, and I quote, "If we don't treat people well enough to make them want to stay, we deserve to lose them." Vernon sighed. I'll call Gerald Hayes myself. This isn't right. My 3rd call was to Natalie Wilson at Pacific Trust. Our biggest client and the one whose security audit was scheduled for next month. Natalie, it's Hal Morrison. Hal, I was just about to call you. We need to move up the timeline on the security audit by 2 weeks. The board is getting nervous about some irregularities in our transaction logs. Natalie, I need to tell you something. I'm not with TechFlow anymore. As of today. The shock in her voice was immediate. What? Where are you going? Vertex Technologies, Cameron Grant's company. There was a long pause. Is this because of the Pinnacle acquisition? We've been worried about that. Ourselves. Service has been slipping since the buyout. It is. They're making major changes, including removing me from your account without telling you. Another pause. Longer this time. Without consulting us? Hal, we specifically wrote into our contract that any changes to the technical lead require our approval. You helped us negotiate that clause. I know. They either forgot about that clause or they're hoping you won't enforce it. Who's taking over the audit? They wouldn't tell me. I heard Natalie take a deep breath. She'd been in the banking industry for 20 years and had seen her share of vendor disasters. Damn it, Hal. This audit is critical for us. The regulatory review is in 6 weeks, and if we're not compliant, she didn't need to finish. Failed regulatory reviews could cost a bank millions in fines, not to mention the damage to their reputation. Send me your new contact information, she said. We need to talk about options. By the time I picked Sophie up from school, my phone had exploded. 14 text messages and 23 emails, 6 from my former team, forwarding messages from Preston instructing them to maintain client continuity and prepare transition documents for all accounts. The rest were from clients who'd somehow already heard I was leaving. The banking industry is smaller than people think. CTOs talk to each other, share war stories about vendors, warn each other about problems. News travels fast when someone trusted suddenly disappears. "Dad, why are you picking me up early?" Sophie asked as she climbed into the car. "It's not Friday." I turned to look at her. This amazing kid who deserved so much better than a father who was always stressed about work, always worried about money, always one bad quarter away from financial disaster. "I left my job today," I said simply. Her eyes widened. "The one you're always working late for? The one that makes you look so tired?" My heart broke a little. Of course she'd noticed. Kids see everything, even when we think we're hiding it. "Yeah, that one." "Good," she said firmly. "I didn't like how they treated you." Out of the mouths of babes. "I got a new job," I told her. "One that pays better and should give me more time at home. Better insurance for your asthma medications, too." She considered this seriously. "Will you be able to come to my graduation ceremony next month?" "Front row," I promised, with embarrassing signs and everything. She grinned. "Cool. Can we get pizza tonight to celebrate?" That night, after Sophie went to bed, my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but the area code was familiar. Corporate headquarters. "Mr. Morrison? This is Gerald Hayes from Pinnacle Corporation." My blood went cold. The founder and CEO of Pinnacle Corporation was calling me personally. This was either very good or very bad. "Mr. Hayes," I managed to say, "I understand we have a situation. I've received calls from 3 of our major clients expressing serious concerns about your departure. They're suggesting they may need to reconsider their vendor relationships." I waited, not trusting myself to speak. "Are you actively encouraging our clients to follow you to Vertex Technologies?" "No, sir. I've simply informed them that I'm no longer with TechFlow. They've drawn their own conclusions about what that means for service quality and continuity." Silence. Then, "Pacific Trust represents an $8 million annual contract. Westfield Bank is $6 million. First National is $4 million. If they leave, others will follow. We've run the projections." I could almost hear the calculators running in the background. Someone had done the math and realized that my early retirement was about to cost them more money than they'd save. What would it take to bring you back to repair this situation? I almost laughed. "Almost? You can't be serious." "I'm very serious, Mr. Morrison. From a purely business perspective, it would be significantly less expensive to retain you than to lose those accounts. So I'm worth keeping when it costs you millions to lose me, but not worth treating fairly when it's just my career and livelihood on the line. Business is business, Mr. Morrison. I'm trying to offer you an opportunity here. No, thank you. I've accepted a position with Vertex Technologies, one that recognizes my value from the start, not just when the alternative becomes expensive. We're prepared to match their offer, plus a substantial retention bonus." For a moment, I was tempted. The safe play would be to go back, take their money, keep my head down for a few more years until I could actually retire. But I thought about Sophie, about the example I wanted to set for her, about what it meant to stand up for yourself when you're being treated unfairly. "It's not about the money," I said, surprised to find I actually meant it. "It's about respect. It's about 15 years of loyalty that your company dismissed without a second thought. It's about Preston Wells looking me in the eye and telling me I should be grateful for a 45% pension cut." A long pause. "What do you want then?" "I want you to treat the people who are still there better than you treated me. I want you to look at what Preston Wells is doing to that office and ask yourself if that's really the company you want to build. I want you to remember that behind every cost optimization and efficiency improvement are real people with families and mortgages and dreams." Another silence. "That's all? That, and stop threatening to sue me for taking a new job. I didn't steal anything. I didn't breach any agreements. I didn't violate any non-compete clauses because you never had us sign any. I simply refused to be devalued and found someone who appreciates what I bring to the table. No lawsuit, he said finally. You have my word. As for the rest, I'll be visiting the regional office next week to see things for myself. After we hung up, I sat in my living room for a long time processing what had just happened. The CEO of a billion-dollar corporation had just called me personally to try to get me back. Not because they suddenly realized they'd been unfair, but because losing me was going to cost them money. It was validation, in a way. Proof that my skills and relationships were valuable. But it was also deeply sad. How many other good people had they pushed out who didn't have clients calling to complain? How many talented engineers and project managers had accepted their early retirement packages because they didn't have other options? 3 days later, I started at Vertex Technologies. They gave me a real office with windows overlooking the city. Not a cubicle, not a shared workspace, but an actual office with a door I could close. My title was Chief Technology Officer, and for the first time in years, I had the authority to build a team from scratch. Cameron Grant met me at the door on my first morning. "Welcome to Vertex, Hal. Ready to show these kids how it's really done?" He was joking, but there was truth in it. The average age at Vertex was probably 28. Most of these developers had never worked on systems that processed billions of dollars in transactions every day. They were brilliant, don't get me wrong, but brilliance without experience can be dangerous in the financial sector. My first hire was Hunter Davis. He called me 2 days after I started at Vertex. "Hal, I can't take it anymore. Preston's got us working on a migration plan that's going to crash every system we have. Isabella and I want to follow you to Vertex, if you'll have us." "What about the visa situation for Abigail?" I asked. Her work authorization was tied to her employment at TechFlow. She's got another offer. Google's cloud division. They're sponsoring her green card application. Hunter and Isabella joined me the following week. Brain drain, they call it in business school. When you treat good people badly, they leave and they take their institutional knowledge with them. The client calls started 2 weeks later. Natalie Wilson was first. "Hal, we've made a decision about the security audit. TechFlow sent a team to meet with us yesterday. 3 junior developers and a project manager who couldn't answer basic questions about our infrastructure. When I asked about regulatory compliance protocols, they told me they'd get back to me on that." I winced. Regulatory compliance isn't something you get back to people about. It's life or death for a bank. We're exercising the clause in our contract that allows us to approve technical leadership changes. Since they can't provide adequate replacement for your expertise, we're considering this a material breach of contract. What does that mean for you? It means we're moving our business to Vertex Technologies. Can you handle our security requirements? Natalie, I designed those systems. I can handle whatever you need. Noah Fisher from Westfield Bank called 3 weeks later. Then Gerald Hayes from First National. Each time, the story was the same. TechFlow would send inexperienced teams who couldn't answer critical questions or understand the complexity of enterprise banking systems. By the 6-month mark, 5 of my former major clients had moved their business to Vertex. Not because I recruited them, I was careful to never initiate those conversations, but because trust matters in enterprise software. Experience matters. And when you've spent years proving yourself reliable, people notice when you're gone. Gerald Hayes kept his word about the lawsuit. There was no legal action, no harassment, no attempts to claim I'd violated agreements that didn't exist. But there was a complete restructuring at TechFlow's regional office. Preston Wells was pursuing other opportunities within 8 weeks. The offshore migration plan was quietly abandoned after the first pilot project resulted in a complete system failure that cost them a smaller client. Rachel from HR was reassigned to a different division, Vernon. Cole called me 4 months after I started at Vertex. "Hal, I wanted you to know, Gerald Hayes fired the entire regional management team. He said what happened to you was inexcusable." "Too little, too late, Vernon." "I know, but I also wanted to tell you something else. Pinnacle's board is questioning the entire TechFlow acquisition. They've lost $18 million in contracts since you left. The acquisition is being written down as a loss. $18 million. That's what my experience and relationships were worth to them. But they'd tried to force me into early retirement to save $90,000 a year. It's been 8 months now. I'm still at Vertex, building something that matters. My team has grown to 15 people, all of them skilled professionals who are treated with respect and paid what they're worth. We're not just another startup burning through investor money. We're building real solutions for real problems. The work is challenging, but satisfying. We're developing security protocols for community, banks, helping them compete with the major institutions without sacrificing safety. Every system we build has to be bulletproof because these banks don't have the resources to recover from a major breach. Most importantly, I'm home for dinner with Sophie almost every night. Haven't missed a school event in months. Her graduation ceremony last month was amazing. She gave the valedictorian speech and talked about resilience and standing up for what's right. I may have cried a little during that speech. She's been accepted to 3 universities and wants to study computer science with a focus on cybersecurity. I want to build things that protect people, she told me. For the first time since the divorce, I'm not worried about how we'll pay for her education. Last week I ran into Vernon Cole at a tech conference. He shook my hand and told me he was proud of how I'd handled everything. I should have protected you all better when I sold to Pinnacle, he said. I thought they'd honor their promises about maintaining company culture. It's business, I said, echoing Gerald Hayes' words to me. Nothing personal. But that's not true, is it? It's always personal. Our work, our worth, our ability to provide for our families, it's all deeply, intensely personal. Pretending otherwise is just a way for companies to treat people as disposable. The real victory wasn't the clients who followed me or Preston getting fired or TechFlow losing millions. Those were just the consequences. The real victory was discovering my own value and refusing to let anyone else define it for me. Standing up and saying, no, I'm worth more than this. I deserve better than this. And then proving it by going out and building something meaningful. I think about that meeting with Rachel and Preston sometimes. That paper sliding across the desk with their insulting offer. That moment when they thought they had all the power and I had none. They were wrong. We all have power. Sometimes we just need to be pushed to our breaking point before we remember it. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting back at anyone. It's about getting away and building something better. Sophie starts college next fall, and I'll be there to help her move into her dorm room. She's going to change the world, that kid. And maybe she learned something from watching her old man stand up for himself when it mattered. Sometimes it really does take just one phone call to change everything. Your worth isn't determined by how others treat you in their worst moments. It's proven by how you respond when you refuse to accept less than you deserve.